This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider and I have two amazing guests today. I'm very excited to introduce them to you and to speak to them. Welcome with me Risa Dickens and Amy Torok. Risa and Amy are both in Canada. Not Montreal as I originally thought, but in the woods of Canada, which we just shortly talked about and which made me really miss my woods in which I lived for the past 4 years in the Pacific Northwest. But back to Risa and Amy. Amy and Risa have a podcast since 2018 called Missing Witches. In 2021, they published a book called Missing Witches, Reclaiming True Histories of Feminist Magic. There is a new book coming out soon, and now I'm so lost with titles. Can one of you help me with the title of the new book? New Moon Magic.
New Moon Magic. Yeah, we think the title of the book is New Moon Magic, 13 Anti-Capitalist Tools for Resistance and Reenchantment.
Oh, when you say it, it doesn't sound that long. When I was writing it down, it felt very long. I love New Moon Magic. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself and your work? How did all of this happen? How did you discover it?
You know, it's funny. We sort of slipped into this realization that we were both witchy practitioners. You know, like we met in a green room at a show in this space of like making music and this sort of creative wide open space. And our lives were both in crazy flux. And it just allowed us to become the kind of friends who make shit up together, you know? Like we just became those kind of friends who would play music and trade books and start to dig into these, you know, feminist histories. And we were trading stories and trying to find stories, real stories of women or, you know, people of marginalized genders or gender expansive people. Like, what is that history? What did they think? What are we missing? You know, it really feels in this sometimes deeply oppressive place of where capitalism and patriarchy meet, that there's this huge, vast knowledge that's missing that could help. And we really met in that place and started to trade stories. And that's where the idea of the podcast came from. And we started writing and researching those histories so that we could kind of tell them to each other, you know? It was really an act of like love and friendship, like, oh my gosh, like passing secrets, you know, like, oh my gosh, I found this woman, I have to tell you. Like I found this life that makes me see the past differently. I have to tell you. And that helped us find our audience. And then we sort of tricked ourselves into writing books by writing these histories, you know? And yeah.
Yeah, I think like a lot of it is, you know, they say like make the thing that you're missing. And I think a lot of it was, you know, we were coming to each other with these, oh, I just discovered this person. And Risa and I both have a lot of formal education, you know, we both are multiple degree holders, and we had never heard of any of these people. And it was like shocking and frustrating, and it made us a little bit angry and resentful. So we just kind of made the podcast that we were missing in our own lives.
Mm-hmm. Where did the witch or the occult part come in? Did it start with it, or did it start with women and this female energy, and what are we missing from this nourishing gut energy, and that led to this idea of witches and occult? Or did it come other way around?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with, you know, us trying to like resist these patriarchal capitalist notions of there being only one correct answer, only one way of thinking. And so the unknown has always been kind of something that's very interesting to us. So I think we just liked the idea of powerful people, but a power that isn't the sense of power that our society has created.
The rational power.
exactly, not oppressive power, but like a personal power that is also, we consider ourselves eco-feminists, and there's just so much intersection between, our connection to the earth, to the unknown, to our own personal power. And witch is just kind of the umbrella term that we use for all of that.
Yeah, I think also, the word witch is like, people have complicated relationships to it, and that's part of what we love about it. It's this word that like people can be afraid of or find ugly, or like, healers don't want to be called witches or whatever. And we were both just like always those kids. Like we were just always drawn to the witch in the story. We're cacklers, like that's just who we are. Like we're those kids making potions and talking to ghosts. And so we were looking for that history, like who else is okay in that space, who else was living out on the edge of town, like who are those women, what's their story?
I have a question for you, which occurred to me while I was reading the description of your book, and I find it so beautiful. It's nice how it connects both of our podcasts or projects, that you also go around the world and discovered various versions of this. It's not only concentrated on in our Western society. But I had a guest from, I forgot, I think Tanzania. I'm not sure, but a country in Africa. And she told me a crazy story about her mom who became widowed. And then the husband's family, in order to get rid of the mom and take everything she and her husband possessed, they accused her of being a witch, and they started a witch hunt and almost killed her and ruined her life. What occurred to me, and I want to kind of put it out there and hear your guys' opinion, is I think we women in the West tend to have a more romanticized, or more, for us, it's this new, exciting, not new, but old and newly discovered idea of this female power that's very, very powerful. And whereas in Africa or Asia, you have to be so careful about using that term, and women still are being hunted and prosecuted under the, being accused of being witches. There's this schizophrene, you know what I mean? This schizophrene division between how we see it in the West and what's happening in the other parts of the world.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Witch hunting is something that's still going on, as you say, and we definitely have to encounter that in our work. I think it's very apt that you say that we have maybe a more romantic notion of the word witch, certainly in North America and in our new sort of modern time of like the witch having this moment in the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
But
we're wishing she's having we're creating the moment right now.
we've got witch talk, and the hashtag witches of Instagram has millions and millions and millions of posts under it. But this is sort of what Risa and I are getting to, that witches have always been outlaws. It has always been a word that has been used against women. And like the story that your guest told you, it's often been used against women for reasons of capital, to take the land. This is, I don't want to get too far off track, but this was a large part of the Salem witch trials. There were the three most famous of the women who were tried at the Salem witch trials. One was, a Black enslaved woman. And the other two were women who were either widowed or neither of them went to church. It was basically just like, we see these women and they're not behaving the way that we want them to behave. Therefore, we need to get rid of them. And as much as we're not maybe hanging witches in the town square now, this is a state of mind that continues. We still talk to people who are good friends of ours who are in the broom closet, as we call it, because they know if they talk to their families, if they talk to the people in their town, that they're going to experience a sort of lighter version of that witch hunting. And once again, we've read so many books. We love Sylvia Federici. We love a book called Witches, Midwives, and Nurses. And these books are about how witch hunts fed patriarchy and fed capitalism. So again, witches have always been outlaws. Obviously, in other parts of the world, it's a lot scarier. It's a lot more deadly. But it was, Ipsita Roy Chakravarti said, or she wrote, every strong woman is a witch and all are hunted. So, yeah. Yeah, and that's part of it for us because we want to recognize that the witch is an outlaw, that it's not just an aesthetic in the modern times, that we really are dissidents.
Let's slowly move towards the mothers, which are the topic of our podcast. But before we go to mothers, I'd like to come back to you two a little more. Are you both originally from Canada?
Yes.
Okay. Risa, do you want to start and tell me about your mom, Sheryl?
Yeah, I do. I love talking about my mom. I mean, it's so complicated, right? I think that's why this podcast you do is so fertile. Like, what did we learn from them? What couldn't they teach us? What did we learn by watching them? Like the questions that you sent are things I love to think about. I'm a mom now, and so that kind of spun all of the way I think about these things a little bit sideways. But my mom's name is Sheryl. My parents had me when they were like 20, and they got divorced when they were like 22. So I lived for a while with just my mom. And I think, you asked me this question, and the main thing that I think I learned from her that she taught me that ties directly to the work I do now and to the way I see my craft, my politics, the intersection of craft and politics that I choose to call witchcraft, is that she really, in a fundamental way, like, she doesn't think very much matters, like, especially like the norms and systems of the world. Like, she just doesn't care. Like, and that can be good or bad, but like she would take me out of school. She would just lie. She would say I had a dentist appointment or something and show up and take me out of school. And I'd be like, I don't want to go to the dentist. And she'd be like, we're not. We're going to get milkshakes. We're going to the library.
That sounds like my mom.
Really? Yeah. She's like, we're going to the park. We're going to the library. Like, she really didn't care about, social norms in a really profound way. She hung all of the art in our house when I was a very small child down at my eye level. So people would come over and be like, why is everything down there? And then there would be footprints all up the hallway walls because I would climb the walls, and she didn't really care about that either. She cared about keeping me fed and safe. She's a really good person, but just like things that other people were bothered about didn't really seem to bother her in that way. And I love that. She just doesn't give a fuck. She sees the truth, I think, in a profound way. She's like a loud burper, which she wouldn't like me to say, but it's true. She's a loud laugher. She'll like scream in a movie, like she really lives like out loud. And we were talking about this. We have like a coven group on our Patreon for our listeners, our community, where we kind of get a bit deeper into some of our own practices and support each other in our practices. And someone, the author Yvonne Arboro was a guest, and she was sharing that she was once walking and she heard a woman behind her say, "Oh my gosh, look at the light in the trees." And the group of people she was with like didn't really react. And she always wished she had turned around and been like, I see it too. Like, it's beautiful. I see it too. And I was sharing in the coven that my mom will like scream when you're driving down the street, like, pull over, look at the light in the trees, everybody. Like my mom will scream with you to like stop and look at the beautiful thing that the world is doing. And I think that's core to how I see the world. Like, yeah, and that's probably the biggest gift she taught me, aside from just her ability to have completely unconditional love and non-judgmental unconditional love.
What does she do? What is she by profession?
Yeah, she's a social psychologist. She's a social worker.
Okay.
When I was growing up, my mom worked with youth sex offenders, so kids who had committed sex crimes against other children. And so she just always came from, this is what I mean by like radical compassion. She could always see. It was annoying, frankly. Like if there was someone I didn't like in school, she would be like, "Oh, I wonder what they're going through right now. I wonder, you know." And so you could never really get away with judging anybody, which I appreciate now. I think that's a gift. Yeah.
Was she a 1968 generation of the flower children?
She's a little bit on the end of that, like
on the end of that. Okay.
Yeah, she was not a flower child. She was a bit too young for that, although it definitely touched her. She was 20 in 1980. So that happened, but she was also like in a small town in Ontario. And she was like 8 years old or whatever when that was going on. So I don't think that impacted her as much. I think the main thing she's told me that impacted her that was going on like in the global cultural zeitgeist when in her mind when she was young was just a fear of nuclear war. Like she was just terrified that the world was going to end, you know? Yeah.
So where do you think she learned that? Do you have any guesses where she got it from? This...
Yeah, it's funny. It's a good question.
Not giving a fuck and just loving life.
You know, to be totally honest, we've had some conversations with my sisters and stuff now where I do wonder if it's like neurodivergence. I'm not sure she learned it from anyone. I think she's wired like that because she a lot of things now that we're circulating between us, me and my sisters, descriptions of ADHD or autism spectrum disorder, whatever, we're like, whoa, that is how we grew up. We never thought of it that way, and a lot of the magic of that, making magical worlds with your kids. My mom, like, I remember her dressing up, full makeup, full costume as a witch, chasing us around the house in the middle of summer. Like, there's no context for it except to make us laugh, The one day it rained when we lived in California, she woke me up at like 4:00 in the morning so we could go run in the rain, but also like our house was chaos, like not disgusting, but like a system to organize your kitchen, a system to organize your books, your crafts, that doesn't exist. All of those categories are everywhere. Every surface is covered in books and crafts. So I don't know if she learned it from somewhere or if it's like a song in her DNA that plays differently.
What do you wish she taught you? Is there anything that you found out was important that she was not able to teach you?
Yeah, I mean that's what a touching question, eh? There's so many things. People must cry on your podcast all the time.
They do.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm sure your listeners weep along with them because this is such a place of longing. I'll tell you this. This is something I feel like I learned by watching, but that is not something she could teach me. And that is boundaries, I don't think she has fully learned how to put up a boundary between herself and others. She's so sensitive. She feels the waves of other people's feelings. And, that's been her job, like to understand very complex people. She's worked with psychotics and schizophrenics and, their family. She just needs to be able to understand. And she does. She's so good at it. She understands their minds. I don't think she has a boundary between herself and others often. And so she just lives with near constant migraine. And that was a part of my life for a long time. And in a busy, city life, and where they live, it's so noisy. And like, I watch, and I've constantly been like, why don't you move? Like, why don't you? And she's like retiring, and she's sort of, life is slowly giving her some quiet, I think. But yeah.
Is she going to move from the city?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
How did she? I'm just reading a book by this amazing psychotherapist called Emotional Inheritance, and she writes about things we inherit from our parents that we sometimes weren't even aware of, from memories to trauma to,
Yeah.
And she writes very openly about sessions with her patients, and I thought reading this, I would burn out in like 3 sessions with these people. How did your mom not burn out if she didn't know how to put up boundaries?
I think she lives in near constant burnout.
Oh, okay.
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think her migraines are what forces her to shut down and lie in the dark with her dog. And I think her craft helps. She makes beautiful quilts and, incredibly complex things. But and so for me, like, I watched that. I was nearly always in migraine. I learned about it not because she taught me, but because I saw that it was necessary. Yeah. So I got my house in the woods when I didn't even have a way to get here. I didn't have very few of the skills required to take care of an old rotting lake house in the woods. But I guess I took a little bit of that like magical thinking that she could sometimes have and used it to get to a space of silence and boundary and trees and believed that like then she would come and my sisters would come and we would have that space together because I would be the one to give it to us.
No, that's beautiful. Risa, is there anything else you'd like to share about what your mom or what you learned from her or didn't before we jump to Amy?
I'll say this, my mother and stepfather are, Christians in this like sort of social justice, Canadian kind of Christianity. There's not a lot of talk about the devil. And I like to give this to people who wonder if their religion or their culture will have space for their own power, or if they think of themselves as witches, or if they were those kids who felt like they could talk to trees and their religion or maybe their parents tell them to be afraid of that. My mother, who has this version of Christianity that is totally her own, told me she doesn't believe in hell. That's not a thing. That she doesn't need that to be part of her Christianity. She believes in this like radical, peace-loving anarchist Jesus who worked with sex workers and, upheld an idea of society that was like completely equal. And that version gives me a lot of peace, even though that church doesn't and isn't for me.
But it's beautiful how we can make things into our own versions. We can pick what we feel is right from each situation.
Yeah, we really can.
I also want to believe in a different Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm not religious in any shape or form, but the little that I know about it, I'm like this Jesus that we see in the churches, that couldn't have been the right thing. That couldn't have been it. There was something else there. But anyway, that's a long other discussion. Can we jump to Amy?
Yes, let's jump.
Amy, now we heard about Mama Sheryl, and we just laughed about how we have Mama Sheryl, and then we have a Mama Sheila. I love the shs.
Sheryl. Yeah, I hope they get to meet someday.
Tell me about Mama Sheila.
I'm trying to think how she would want herself to be introduced, and then try to pair that with the truth.
Well, what's the truth?
I mean, the halfway between there is that, I'm from a Christian household as well, but my mother raised me feminist first and Christian second, which I think she now believes was a mistake. But certainly in terms of like a from birth message, feminism was it. It was very much like, your gender is not going to determine who you are or what you can be. She told me a lot. She was born in the 1940s. She's older. So she told me, like my girlfriends and I, we had 3-4 choices. We could be teachers, nurses, secretaries or housewives. And those were pretty much the options. And I think she's sort of that classic tale of the woman who wanted more for her life, but just didn't see a way to have, a big, bold, amazing life. So she wanted to make sure that her daughters did. Now that's a lot of pressure sometimes when you're that daughter. But she was the type of mom who would change the endings of fairy tales, who would feminist up the storylines of, the ending was never just like getting the prince and living happily ever after. It was, she became a lawyer and then, helped other princesses who had been that kind of thing, So I would say like a from birth thrust that I am super grateful to her for is that feminist mindset.
How many children did she have?
2. I have an older sister.
Okay. So she raised you with the power, female power.
Yeah, I mean, notionally, if not in her own actions, philosophically, theoretically, but she didn't always necessarily.
Does that work? Amy, does that work? Because I'm learning more and more through these interviews that what really matters is what our moms show us rather than tell us.
That's a great question. And I sort of had in mind that I wanted to say this earlier, so I'm glad I have this opportunity, is that to me, and again, this is just for me, I believe that in terms of learning, not in terms of being like a healthy, well-adjusted human being, but in terms of learning our lessons, I think that a bad role model is almost as good as a good role model. If you can look at a situation like I looked at a lot of my mother's choices from a very young age and said, no, that's not what I want for my life. That's not how I want to do things. And so I'm going to push myself in the opposite direction. It really did help me. She divorced my father when I was pretty young and got remarried. And for me, as a young woman, it was very empowering to know that getting married wasn't going to solve all my problems or make me happy forever and ever for the rest of my life, and they were happily ever after. I knew that was a lie because I had seen that lie in action. So again, like I never put too much stock in male attention. I was never boy crazy or anything like that because I was doing my own thing. Because I had seen this version of, living under the rules of a man. And I completely rejected that. That. So again, like I say, I think a good role model is better. But if you don't have access to a good role model, then you can still take those same lessons from a bad role model. It's just about what you don't want in your life as opposed to what you do want in your life.
I love this. This is, you put it so beautifully in words, what I talked to my guests about in the last 100 interviews, and how that's the other, I'm always saying I don't want this podcast to be a glorification of mothers. And when I invite women to be my guests, sometimes they reject because they say, my mom, I didn't learn anything, or there was nothing to learn from my mom.
Not possible.
And exactly, Amy. This is why I love what you just said, because that's so important to say, no, we can learn from the negative role model as well.
Yeah, and sometimes even more so. Sometimes those lessons are even more powerful, Like Risa was talking about how her mother rejected social norms. And I love that. And I wish, that Sheryl was my mother, obviously. I've met her several times and it's been a joy every time. But my mother was very into social norms. She was very into what will the neighbors think. And again, I saw that as an oppressive force. So, I started dyeing my hair purple when I was 15, 16. I wanted to experiment because I could see that these laws that she was living under weren't real. They were imaginary, and she was almost oppressing herself with them. So that made me experiment more. That made me live out loud more than maybe I would have.
Is there anything else you'd like to share as things you learned from her?
Yes. And again, I got a lot of very good role model lessons from my mother. Something that she said to me once, and I think maybe this is the kind of compassion that Risa's mother has, but it's got a little bit of a forked tongue in it. And there's a bit of a sting to it. She told me that people are going to try to build you up and people are going to try to tear you down. But either way, everyone else is just trying to bring everyone else to their level. That was important for me because when people were trying to tear me down, I recognized that as their own self-loathing, their own fear, their own jealousy, their own self-hatred, as a desire to bring me down to their level as opposed to anything else. So that really stuck with me. That was one of those things, you know, when you're in the car with your mom and she's driving and she just says something that sticks with you for the rest of your absolute fucking life.
Wow.
You know,
did she repeat that? Did she say it only once and it was like, this is it? Or would she continuously remind you of this?
Just the once. Just the once. Mm-hmm. I remember the color of the car. I remember the smell. But what I really want to plead with mothers out there who are listening, who are thinking about raising your own children and how difficult and what a minefield and how it's a constant negotiation of your child's safety, but also their ability to think critically and, you know, keep themselves safe and have their own mind. I just would ask all parents to the best of your ability and within reason, to tell the truth. My mother lied to me a lot, thinking that she was maybe protecting me from the truth, or maybe it was just easier for her. I don't know what her motivations were. I could go bad role model, good role model with this. But, you know, stuff like, oh, your father's gone on vacation. Oh, and I remember my sister saying to me, if dad's on vacation, why did he take his paintings with him? And I remember standing in the kitchen and being like, okay, well, you know, that's the truth. And your kids know. They know. And this goes for your friends and your husbands and wives. People know. I've known so many people outside of the parent-child relationship who think, well, I just won't talk about it, and then nobody will know. Everybody knows. Everybody. Indeed, a friend of mine, she's been going through something, and her mom called her and she's like, why are you angry with me? Our relationship hasn't been the same for the past year. And I was talking to my friend saying, like, you have to tell her the truth. Your mother knows that something is wrong. And you pretending that nothing is wrong makes her think that she's done something to you. So I really think we have this notion of protecting people by not telling them the truth. And it's false. It's false. It's false. It's a false narrative. Again, within reason, you don't have to tell the ugly truth to every, you know, you don't have to tell somebody that they're, you know, but in terms of these real fundamental like truths about ourselves, just please be honest with your children. Please be honest with the people that you love, because they know. Whether you think they do, they do.
I just learned that yesterday again, because I was 3 days ago, I was diagnosed with a umbilical hernia and a gallstone.
Ouch.
So I'll have to go into surgery to repair one and take out the other. And so my 7-year-old son is here, you know, he knows that I went to doctors and I'll have to go to surgery. So this somehow he got it through. I was so busy with myself that I didn't pay attention to how I'm communicating this to him. And then at one point we were out on the balcony and he started talking about the fence on our balcony, which needs to be changed. The whole house is changing, all the apartments. And he started getting very upset about how dare they change the fence on our balcony without asking us, and what kind of fence will they put in there, and it's going to be so ugly and he doesn't want it, and he started crying about it. And I was like, this something's off. He's not crying about the fence,
Yeah.
And it took me 5 minutes and I was like, what's going on? And then I was like, shit, he's crying about me. He doesn't know what's going on and somebody else wants to come and do something and exchange something or change it. He feels totally uninformed and out of control. And I sat him down and I said, Kai, listen, I have to tell you what's going on in my body. I'm not sick, this and this. And then I explained to him in detail exactly what's going on, what the plan is. I'm not sick. And I just saw lights go off. And what you said just reminded me, people know.
Yeah.
He's 7. And I thought he got it through our conversation, but he didn't. I didn't sit him down and tell him, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful lesson. Thank you for sharing that.
I do that too. I freak out about the fence. It's not about the fence.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
never about the fence. But we all do that. So I just want to applaud you for noticing that in your child and saying, okay, this isn't about the fence. So let's talk about what's really happening.
Yeah. What an important thing. Tell the truth.
Yes.
And no matter to whom, to your children primarily, but also your beloved ones.
Yes.
Anything else, Amy, you'd like to share about what you've learned from her or what you wish she taught you as telling the truth went?
I mean, again, I think that role models are what we make of them. What I wish I had gotten were some practical life skills. I mean, all the emotional philosophy I managed to get on my own, but darn if my life wouldn't have been easier if I had, learned how to ride a bike when I was a kid instead of having to teach myself when I was an adult. So I guess, ultimately I would say like life skills and just tell the truth. Give your kids the skills that they need to, go out into the world on their own.
Amy, I wanna ask you more about this because, interestingly enough, many of my guests complain about this, and they say, and I used to be shocked in the beginning because I would have this. Doctors in molecular biology or lawyers, and they would say, I wish my mom taught me how to cook and clean. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
and because we think so in pluses and minuses and black and whites, and I'm like, you don't need to cook and clean, but they said, no, I do, because it would make my life easier. It would, back then when I couldn't afford help, I would know how to help myself. And now that I can afford help, it would make it simpler for me to know what I need, And it's interesting, this life skills, the simple things in life that sometimes we just overlook how important they can be.
And especially, I mean, gendering life skills, I think, you swore before, so I'm going to say is total bullshit. Teaching your daughters to cook and your sons how to pump gas is ridiculous. Everybody needs to pump gas and everybody needs to eat
cook.
Food and cook. Everybody needs
Exactly.
to tidy up their house. So let's definitely stop gendering these
Exactly.
life skills.
No, it's not about the gender, but it's about teaching life skills.
Yeah. And I mean, some parents just don't bother for whatever reason, There are a million different reasons that kids don't learn what they need to learn.
Yeah. Ladies, this was absolutely fantastic. I think we could go on and on.
Indeed.
And we will. We can't wait to have you on our podcast to learn so much more from you and continue this.
I'm so excited. Let's talk about my magical island.
Yes.
I mean, Nick always says you can't call it my island because people will think you own an island. But the island I come from.
It's the island that owns you. Yeah, we can't wait. We can't wait. And you have so much insight from so many different people. So we're really excited to have you. We're excited to kind of invite our communities to meet each other. So thank you for having us.
I'm very, very excited. Is there anything you wish to add to our conversation?
Even if you're mad at your mother, have some compassion. She's struggling too. And she also had a mother who probably didn't teach her the things that she's not teaching you.
Yeah. I think we've seen a lot of people who we've interviewed who have some kind of practice, animist practice, ancestral practice, magical practice. who, by reason of the transatlantic slave trade or other reasons are disconnected from an ancestral lineage. There's so many people have told us, like, you can find your way to other ancestors, to other mothers. That knowledge is in you. The body is an ancestor, as Sophie Strand told us, like you have inside you an ancestral relationship to bird mothers and tree mothers, and to many, many hundreds of thousands of other parents. So all of that is available to you, and you're not alone. You have a great kinship.
Thank you for saying that. This is what I learned through this podcast, and it just opened my eyes to this, I want to say, sisterhood that's out there. And I still don't understand, maybe I will one day, why we don't feel it stronger. Why do we still feel so separated?
Because of capitalist patriarchy.
You got it. Eh?
I'll drop the mic and leave.
Okay, so for all the listeners that want to learn more about this, please listen to Amy's and Risa's podcast, Missing Witches. Ladies, thank you so much again for being my guests.
Thank you so much, Anna.
If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyoumama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.